What's up, Weirdo Swarm, and welcome to Podagon Infinity. This is what we're calling Episode 1. Last time was Episode 0, which was just a quick introduction to us and what this show is going to be about. But this time, this is official Episode 1, and it's going to be a brief history lesson and introduction to the band. To set the stage of where we currently are in Giz history, as of right now, while we're recording this, we are patiently awaiting the arrival of the band's 26th studio album, titled Flight B741. So far, they've dropped one single called Les Risques, and it kicks total ass.
It really does, and I'm a classic rock aficionado as it is, and just the fact that Flight B741 is going to have so much of that classic rock, bluesy rock, kind of 70s sound to it. I'm just super stoked for it. And speaking of sounds, the band has so many different sounds and different angles and eras, if you will. And really, the way I like to introduce the band to people without going too far off the deep end, without boring them too much in conversation, I like to tell people that there's something genre-wise in the King Gizzard catalog for just about everyone. They have rock, they have psychedelic, they have electronic, they have almost jazz fusion texture going on.
Even rapping
albums.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and even rapping sometimes. And yeah, I think suffice to say that we can, I think playing a few short samples will be a better way to demonstrate how different they can be from themselves, from one album to the next, or even from one song to the next, because sometimes they sound like this. And other times they sound more like this.
Stuck in a daydream under a moonbeam.
Or perhaps even something like this.
And believe it or not, sometimes they even sound like this.
So even if you have never listened to this band before, I'm sure you can hear by our quick samples there that they have something for everybody. There's such a diversity across their entire music catalog, and it's really what I think makes them so special as a band, as musicians.
And there's so many hands on deck with this band. There's 6 active band members, and especially for the newcomers to King Gizzard, we want to make part of this episode, as we mentioned, an introduction to the band members themselves this time. So the frontman of the group, and really the ringleader of the band in general, is Stu McKenzie. He does lead vocals on the majority of songs, plays the guitar, and a whole slew of other instruments. And if there's one man in the band that you can really point to as sort of the ringleader of the group, it's Stu. He's the mastermind behind so much of what King Gizzard does.
Next up is Ambrose Kenny Smith, or simply Ambi, as a lot of people know him as. He contributes a lot of vocals as well on songs, not quite as much as Stu, but he is very prominent on a lot of tracks. And even when he's not singing lead vocals, he still does a ton of backup vocal work, as well as what he might be most iconic for, which is his harmonica playing. He absolutely shreds on the harmonica. He actually inspired me to buy a harmonica and try to learn how to play it. So absolutely a huge contributor to the band. And he plays a lot of other instruments as well. He'll play around with like saxophone, and I've seen him use some brass instruments, as well as keys a little bit here and there as well. So he is another big part of the band. That's a huge chunk of a lot of their music.
Yeah, he's multi-talented, but dude, give me all that harmonica, baby. Ambi, bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got Joey Walker, guitarist, and also contributes quite a bit of vocals along with Stu and Ambi.
Yeah, there's you can see a pattern here. A lot of them sing. At least those 3. Those are the big ones that you're going to hear a lot as you dive into their music. But lest we not forget Cook Craig, otherwise known as simply Cookie or Cookie Dog. He plays guitar for the band. He is the 3rd guitarist, or not to put them in any particular order, but 3 of them play guitar. He is almost always playing guitar, but you do see him sometimes on the keys as well. And there are a handful of tracks throughout the group's discography where he is the lead vocalist on this song. And I think he has a very standout kind of iconic voice. And I love a lot of the songs that he's in. A lot of them tend to be kind of like sillier or not super serious songs, and especially like Garden Goblin, for example, is just funny and it's great, and I love him on that track. So that's Cookie Dog.
Yeah, definitely. And so moving on the band lineup, you've got Lucas Harwood, the bassist. He doesn't appear as much on the albums, I learned over time. He does regularly go on tour with the band. He has been on them regularly on this current tour they're on. And he is he's the bassist, but he has a family back home in Australia that I understand he likes to dedicate a lot of time to. So good on him for being that family man, while at the same time still contributing some tasty bass licks to the King Giz catalog.
Yeah, you can't have all of those 3 guitars going at once without the bass backing them up. As a bassist myself, I got to give my man some credit. I think Lucas is a phenomenal bassist. I love what he does throughout their catalog of music, and I did not know that that he wasn't always involved in all the recordings of their stuff, actually.
Yeah, he kind of comes and goes based on my understanding of everything. I know Stu will sometimes play some bass parts, and other members will contribute in that regard as well. And then, of course, completing the rhythm section in the present day is Mr. Michael Cavanaugh, better known to the fan as Cavs. He's the drummer. He is just a modern-day legend, if you ask me. I mean, you look at what some of the stuff he did on albums like Petrodragonic Apocalypse, which we will get into, of course, at a later date, as we will with all the other albums. It's just ridiculous the way he thrashes the skins and makes things happen on the drum kit.
Yeah, Cavs is a monster. I love his drumming, and he just always seems like they all seem like super chill, cool guys, but Cavs just always seems like way laid back. Even when he's playing, he's just doing crazy shit with like what looks like minimal effort. Like, it just looks so easy the way he plays. So that wraps up the current lineup of all 6 guys that currently make up King Gizzard. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Eric Moore, who was a former drummer of the band. They used to have 2 drummers up until him leaving the band in 2020. If you listen to a lot of their older music before that year, you can actually hear it. Sometimes there's certain drums that are panned left and right, where one thing's happening on the left and slightly different pattern is happening on the right side. That is Cavs and Eric working together, both drumming. They would both play on the records as well as playing together live, and I think it definitely is a big part of what makes the band's older work super unique and super special sounding. Eric only left the band to focus on the record label. He was running things with the record label Flightless, and so he left to focus on that and step away from the band. But we wanted to give Eric a special shout out. We didn't forget about you, buddy.
Course not. And then we also want to give a shout out to a couple of other key guys in the Giz family. Jason Galea, who's the artwork master of the group. He does so much work on album artwork, on their music videos, tour posters. He's just insanely talented when it comes to all the band's artwork, and so we wanted to give a shout out to Jason Galea, as well as Sam Joseph, who you'll hear referred to as "Turn It Up, Sammy" by Stu on many tour dates. I think you can hear that in some of the, if I'm not mistaken, some of the Red Rocks songs. Oh
yeah, specifically, I listened to the whole Red Rocks, I think it was 2022 concert not too long ago, and you can hear him say that several times throughout the long 3-hour chunks of those shows. So yeah, turn it up, Sammy. Special shout out to him.
Yeah, Sammy, the tour manager for King Giz, and also the sound guy for all their shows. So that's another guy we wanted to shout out here.
He's definitely part of the reason why they sound so damn good live, and I can't wait to go see them again.
Now, as for where these guys all came from, they're all from Australia, born and raised, specifically the southern regions of Australia. So they all met in their native country of Australia in the southern provinces of Victoria and New South Wales. So Stu, Joey, and Eric met at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology studying the music industry. And when I say the name of the city, Melbourne, that is not me, an American, trying to pretend to be Australian. That is indeed the preferred way of pronouncing the city's name, regardless of whether or not you live. Yeah, not Melbourne. That is the preferred way of pronouncing the city's name. And fun fact, as a quick aside here, my career background is in sports broadcasting, and throughout the years I've had many friends and acquaintances do play-by-play broadcasting in the Australian Baseball League. And that league has a team in Melbourne called the Aces, and I only learned that was the preferred pronunciation regardless of where you're from from listening to friends' play-by-play broadcasts.
The more you know.
Okay.
The band's lineup was solidified in 2011. Ambrose was the last to join the band that year. They dropped their first EP titled Willoughby's Beach that year, and little did the world know how much they'd grow from there. Just to clarify something that's a little confusing to me and maybe to a lot of people, when we count their albums, most people seem to not include Willoughby's Beach. It is an EP. It's only about 22 minutes long or something like that. So usually their next record that came out after that is what people consider their first full album.
Yeah, Willoughby's Beach was self-released by the band, and it wasn't until the following year, 2012, that the album 12 Bar Bruise was the first release on the Flightless label. So when people talk about the number in the catalog, if you will, for King Gizzard of which album they're on. For example, the Silver Cord being number 25 and the upcoming Flight B741 being number 26. That does not start with Willoughby's Beach. It starts with 12 Bar Bruise because that was the first release on the Flightless label. That being said, I and a good handful of other fans out there I know really love Willoughby's Beach anyway. It's very different sound, very raw, and we're, of course, going to do our own album discussion on that on an upcoming episode later on. But that album, regardless of whether or not it's technically part of the count of 25 albums and counting, it's still a fantastic little gem.
Yeah, so these guys only have 25 albums as of right now and not 26. But speaking of their album output, they are crazy. You're probably wondering, if you've never listened to them, how have they put out 25 albums in the span of how many years? 13 years at this point since their first release? Well, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how they do it, but they do because they're insane.
They are insane, but we say that in the most loving and excited of ways.
Yes, of course. With all the love in the world, they're insane in the best way possible. So these guys have put out an album almost every year since they first came out onto the scene. And several years where they put out more than one album. There's only one year that comes to mind off the top of my head where they didn't release anything, which was 2018. But there is a pretty fair reason for that, and that's because the year before, 2017, is one of the infamous years where they dropped 5 records in the span of a single year, and the last one of that year came out on December 31st, just so they can really squeeze in number 5 before the new year.
Yeah, they wanted to keep us waiting. I say us, I wasn't actively into the band just yet, but they went on to record another 5-album cycle, or release a 5-album cycle again in 2022. So it's just like, with this band, you think you've seen the bottom of their bag of tricks, but it's just like a constant, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, and when they recently announced the new upcoming B741 album, at the time of the announcement, I think it had been like 8 months or something since their last album, The Silver Cord, came out. And it was so funny because you just see people talking online about, oh, it's been a few months now. Where's the next record announcement? You know, yeah, everyone starts panicking when we don't have news of new music after like a few months. And yeah, when this comes out, I think it'll be... it was October of 2023 when The Silver Cord was released. So I think it'll be, about like 8 months or 9 months, in between album releases here, and believe it or not, that's actually could be considered kind of a long gap for this band. We're so spoiled.
If you need, we are so spoiled as fans of King Giz, and that just is really a testament to how hardworking this group is. And I know one of my earliest thoughts when it came to sort of a tagline or a summation of this show, when you and I first started coming up with ideas for this show, I was billing them, and I think I had heard this mentioned elsewhere before too, somewhere, that King Gizzard are the hardest working rock band on earth. And just, I mean, look at the catalog, the stats we just gave you, the 5 albums in both 2017 and 2022, the 25 total over the course of 13 years. I mean, it's nuts. Nobody does that anymore.
Yeah, there are definitely some other examples in history of artists that have had crazy music output like this, but in current day and modern history, I think they're one of the biggest ones doing that type of thing, and I think they deserve all the credit in the world for how hard they work.
And before we go any further, I would assume that for the newcomers to King Gizzard listening into this show, probably one of the first and foremost questions on your mind about this band is where the heck did that name come from? Well, the aforementioned Stu McKenzie, ringleader of this crazy group, was asked in an online AMA, Ask Me Anything, at some point in 2023. He was addressing the question where the band name came from, and wouldn't you know, he couldn't fully remember. His answer to this question was basically some form of, we were probably heavily inebriated at the time, and we were just throwing out some possibilities, throwing out some suggestions, and that was what ended up sticking. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think I remember reading as well that in the really early days, they played a bunch of local gigs and stuff under a variety of different names before they ever actually settled on anything. And so that whole inebriated state thing of coming up with the name, I think that checks out for me.
Yeah, and I actually have the answer pulled up here that I was getting at that Stu gave on the AMA. King Giz was formed so informally, this is a quote directly from Stu, that for a long time there was no name at all. We would get together and hang, jam, chat about life, stay up late, all the fun stuff. Once we started getting some gigs, we performed under various names before settling on the absurd and sometimes annoying one that we have now. I don't remember the exact origins, but I think it involved a certain state of inebriation and a few laughs. It just sounded funny. Anyway, for some reason the name stuck, and now the joke is on us. End quote. So that if that's not just a harbinger of what was to come for this band, I don't know what is. That was just the perfect origin story behind the name, and just by extension, what all this fan base would get hit with in the years to come after that.
I guess the joke is also on us, the fans, as well, because every time people ask us about our favorite music and favorite bands, we have to say that name and describe it to people and repeat ourselves. So the joke is on all of us. We're all in it together, Stewie boy.
Yeah, I think just the most pervasive reaction that people have had when I bring up the band name is just this contortion of their faces into this somewhat combination of disgust and curiosity, and sometimes just, okay, I'm going to let this guy listen to whatever the heck he wants to. I don't know if I want a part of this, but, I mean, if you've come this far, you're in, baby. I mean, there's no escaping now.
Yeah, and I think in a way it almost might work in their favor, because that's not an easy name to forget. I mean, it stands out among all the other artists out there. So I don't know, maybe it did turn out to be a good thing for them overall.
Yeah, could you imagine being the band live? That's a band that I enjoy very much. Could you imagine the SEO issues that might have plagued them had they been coming out more in the internet heyday? You'd just be typing up looking for this band live, but all these results are coming up. Live band performing in Seattle, live band performing in New York. The internet probably had no idea that you were trying to search for a band called Live. So point being, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, you stand out with a name like that. And yeah, ultimately that worked to their advantage, as we can see.
So now that you are plenty familiar with the band, whether you're a complete newcomer or you're a fellow proud weirdo swarm gizheads such as ourselves, just listening for a refresher or a quick history lesson, you are now ready for our first album discussion episode. As we mentioned in episode 0, which was our quick little introductory episode before this one, we mentioned we're going to be doing album discussions and analysis episodes. We're doing them in no particular order, but we do have a special one that we picked to do for our first album for just personal reasons. Spencer, you want to go ahead and tell the good people which album we'll be talking about first?
Yeah, an album that's very near and dear to both of our hearts. We will be talking about Fishing for Fishies.
Fishing for Fishies is special because it is the first full album of theirs that I ever listened to, and I believe Spencer's as well. I think it was the first album I told you to listen to when I was first telling you about the band, because it is, we feel that it's very approachable and for a wide audience, and so I think it's a great one to talk about first just because of our personal connection with it and how it really introduced us and got us in deep with the band's music overall.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it, and we hope you'll take the journey with us.
That is going to be it for episode 1, an introduction to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, if you haven't already, go ahead and give us a follow on social media. We are a brand new show, so we do need all the help we can get. We are at Podagon Infinity on all the major social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X if you will. We also have an email address where you can write into the show with discussion topics or questions or requests for what our next album discussion should be. It's podagoninfinity@gmail.com. My name is Joe.
My name is Spencer.
Later, Gators.
Woo!